Wow, you weren't kidding about the reading material this time. We've got a mountain of stuff to unpack here. But hey, I'm always up for a challenge, especially when it comes to a topic as important as this: secondary school math teachers.
Yeah, it looks like we're diving deep into the world of teaching algebra and geometry to those sometimes less than enthusiastic teenagers.
And these RoleCatcher guides you've dug up are fascinating. It's not just the usual how to be a teacher stuff. These really get into the nitty-gritty of what this career really entails.
Yeah, you're right. It seems like you're really after the inside scoop, not just the surface level stuff. You want to understand the day-to-day realities of the classroom, the skills that are truly essential for success.
Exactly. And maybe even get a glimpse into how a math teaching career can evolve over time, right? From newbie teacher to seasoned pro, maybe even a math maestro.
I like that, math maestro. But first things first, before we get ahead of ourselves, let's talk about what a math teacher actually does. Beyond the obvious, of course.
Beyond the numbers and equations and all that jazz.
Exactly, because when you really dig into it, it's so much more than just standing at the front of the classroom lecturing about the Pythagorean theorem.
Which, by the way, still makes my head spin a little bit, even after all these years.
Well, that's the thing. It's about being able to take those complex, sometimes intimidating concepts and make them relatable and even, dare I say, FUN for those algebra-allergic teens.
That's where the real magic happens, right? When you can spark that interest, that aha moment in a student who thought they hated math.
Precisely. And that's where all those other essential skills come into play, the ones that might not be immediately obvious when you think about being a math teacher.
You mean like beyond just knowing how to solve for X and Y?
Exactly. Because while a strong grasp of mathematics is undoubtedly crucial, and in fact the guide actually quantifies it, stating that 70% of the job relies on those math skills.
Wow, 70%. That's a hefty chunk. So you're saying that 30% of being a math teacher isn't about the math itself?
Well, not exactly. It's more about the fact that even within that 70%, it's not just about crunching numbers or memorizing formulas, it's about pedagogical content knowledge. Being able to translate those formulas and equations into a language that teenagers can understand.
That makes sense. It's like being fluent in two languages, the language of advanced mathematics and the language of teenage brains.
That's a great analogy. You have to be able to bridge that gap to make those abstract concepts relatable and engaging. And that's where those other essential skills come. In reading comprehension, writing the guide emphasizes that these are nearly as important as the mathematics itself.
It's like being a translator of sorts. You're taking these complex ideas and finding ways to make them click for those developing minds. And speaking of clicking, the guide also mentions tech skills as being pretty important, which makes sense, right? I mean, it is 2024.
Absolutely. Technology is no longer just an add-on in the classroom. It's an integral part of how students learn today. Think interactive whiteboards, educational apps, virtual simulations. It's a whole new world of possibilities.
So not only do you have to be a math whiz, but you also have to be a bit of a tech guru. It's like being a superhero with a protractor.
Huh. That's a perfect way to put it.
Yeah.
But we all know that with great power comes great responsibility, right? And speaking of responsibility, let's talk about the realities of the job. Because while being a math teacher can be incredibly rewarding, it's not always sunshine and perfect equations.
Yeah, there's got to be a reason why they call it a workload, right?
Right. The guide doesn't shy away from the challenges. Long hours, demanding students, the pressure to meet those ever-present educational standards. It's a demanding job. It takes resilience, patience, and a good dose of humor to thrive in that environment.
Yeah, I can only imagine. The guide actually lists heavy workload and long hours, along with dealing with challenging students and behavior issues as some of the drawbacks of the job. So it's not just about loving math, it's also about being able to manage a classroom full of teenagers.
Exactly. And let's not forget about those high expectations and pressure to meet educational standards that are constantly looming over everything. There's a lot riding on the shoulders of a math teacher, and it's important to go into this career with a realistic understanding of both the rewards and the challenges.
It makes you appreciate the dedication and passion that so many math teachers bring to the classroom every single day, even when they're facing those challenges. They're not just teaching math, they're shaping young minds. They're inspiring a love of learning, and they're preparing those students for a future that's going to be driven by data and technology, whether they realize it or not.
You're absolutely right. And one of the most interesting things about this career path is that it's not static. There's room to grow, to specialize, even to step into leadership roles if that's something you aspire to.
That's right. The guide actually maps out these distinct stages of a math teaching career: entry-level, junior, experienced, and senior, almost like leveling up in a video game.
Exactly. And just like in those video games, you start at the beginning, learning the ropes, assisting with lesson plans, getting a feel for the rhythm of the classroom.
And then as you gain experience and confidence, you get to level up.
Yeah.
You start designing your own curriculum, developing your own teaching style, maybe even mentoring other teachers.
Precisely. And eventually you might even find yourself leading department-wide initiatives, taking on administrative roles within the school or district of the part. The possibilities are pretty amazing.
It's kind of inspiring to see how much room for growth there is within this one profession. It's not a one-size-fits-all kind of career. You can really make it your own.
And that's what makes it so exciting, right? You're not just choosing a job, you're choosing a path, an adventure. And who knows where that path might lead.
You know, speaking of making it your own, one thing that really struck me about these RoleCatcher guides is this whole idea of specialization within math teaching. It's not something you always think about, at least I didn't.
It's funny you should mention that. Most people don't. Even those who are already in the field, they often don't realize just how many different avenues there are to explore. The guide itself doesn't go into a ton of specifics about specific specializations.
Which is kind of cool in a way, right?
Exactly. It's like a wide open field ripe for exploration. It's almost like you get to design your ideal math teaching job.
Yeah,
You know?
I love that. So it's not just about what level you teach at elementary, middle school, high school, but it's also about the type of math you specialize in, the types of students you work with. You could even find ways to integrate math with other subjects you're passionate about.
Precisely. Imagine, let's say you've always been fascinated by the connection between math and music. You could actually become the go-to teacher for that. You could create lesson plans that connect those concepts. You could even start an after-school music program that uses math principles. The possibilities are endless.
Okay, now my mind is officially blown. That's so cool. And it's not just about following someone else's curriculum. You could actually be creating new ways of teaching, new approaches to learning.
And that's where the real magic happens, in my opinion.
Yeah.
When you can bring your own passions and expertise into the classroom and share that with students.
Yeah, totally. It's about igniting that spark, helping them see the beauty and relevance of math in all aspects of life. And speaking of relevance, this whole conversation reminded me of something else the guide mentions about needing to identify learning disorders as part of the job.
Ah, yes. That's a crucial aspect of teaching, regardless of the subject, but especially important in a field like math. Just like some students have a natural knack for languages, others have a knack for numbers.
Right. And just as some students might struggle with reading comprehension, others might struggle with numerical comprehension, something like dyscalculia, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's up to us as educators to recognize those differences, to provide the support and resources that those students need to succeed. Because everyone learns differently, and a one-size-fits-all approach just doesn't cut it.
It makes you realize how important it is to create a classroom environment that celebrates those differences, right? To make it a place where every student feels seen, heard, and supported, regardless of their individual learning style or pace.
And that actually ties into another key skill mentioned in the guide, intercultural teaching strategies. It's not just about being sensitive to different cultural backgrounds, although that's obviously a huge part of it. It's about recognizing how those backgrounds can influence how students learn best, how they perceive math itself, even their comfort level when it comes to asking for help.
That's a really good point. For some students, the way math was taught in their culture might be vastly different from the way it's traditionally taught here in the US, for example. It could create a kind of cultural disconnect when it comes to learning.
Right. A student might come from a culture that emphasizes rote memorization, while the curriculum here might prioritize problem solving and critical thinking. And as teachers, we need to be able to bridge those gaps.
It's about creating a learning environment where all students feel understood and supported, regardless of their background or learning style, so they can fully engage with the material and reach their full potential.
Precisely. And it's not just about accommodating those differences, it's about celebrating them, right? Seeing that diversity as an asset.
Exactly, because different perspective and different ways of thinking only make the learning experience richer and more dynamic for everyone involved.
Couldn't agree more. And that actually leads us to another important aspect of teaching that the guide touches on. Apply teaching strategies, which might seem like a bit of a given. I mean, isn't that what Teaching Eye is all about? But it actually speaks to the incredible adaptability and flexibility required of a math teacher, especially in today's diverse classrooms.
It's like you've got this whole toolkit of teaching strategies at your disposal, and you need to know which tool to use or even how to combine those tools in creative ways to reach different types of learners. It's about being responsive, not just reactive.
That's a great way to put it. For one student, using visuals might be the key to unlocking their understanding. Think graphs, diagrams, maybe even 3D models to really bring those concepts to life. But for another student, a more hands-on, project-based approach might be what resonates with them.
Right. Some students learn best by applying those concepts in a real-world context. And then there are those students who might thrive in a more collaborative learning environment.
Exactly, where they can bounce ideas off their peers, work together to solve problems, learn from each other's strengths.
It really highlights how important it is to be able to adapt your teaching methods to meet the individual needs of each student, to create that kind of Goldilocks zone of learning, you know?
I love that analogy, the Goldilocks zone of learning. Not too hard, not too soft, but just right.
Exactly. And finding that sweet spot for each and every student, that's where the real artistry of teaching comes in, I think. But I imagine that takes a lot of, I don't know, intuition, observation, maybe even a little trial and error, right? Especially when you're also trying to maintain students' discipline and manage student relationships, which feel less like teaching skills and more like, I don't know, social emotional intelligence skills
You're
almost.
so right. And that's something that often doesn't get enough attention in teacher training programs. Because let's be real, managing a classroom full of teenagers, each with their own unique personalities, learning styles, energy levels, that can be just as demanding, if not more so, than actually teaching the math itself.
Oh, I can really imagine, especially with all the pressures that teachers are facing these days, standardized testing, curriculum changes, you name it. And on top of all that, you're also trying to create this safe, positive, and productive learning environment.
It's a lot to juggle, for sure. But here's the thing. When you can create that kind of classroom culture, when students feel seen, heard, and respected, it makes a world of difference. When they trust you and they feel like you genuinely care about their well-being, they're more likely to buy into the learning process, even when it's tough.
It's about creating that sense of community, right?
Hmm.
Where everyone feels safe to take risks, to make mistakes, to learn and grow together.
Exactly. And that sense of safety and support is so crucial, especially in a subject like math, which can feel very intimidating for some students. Because let's face it, those high expectations and pressure to meet educational standards that the guide talks about, those are real, and they can create a lot of stress and anxiety for students, especially those who might already be struggling.
It's that classic double-edged sword, right? We want to challenge our students. We want to help them achieve those high standards, but we also want to create a learning environment where it's okay to not be perfect, where mistakes are seen as valuable opportunities for growth.
Exactly. Because let's be honest, who among us hasn't made a mistake or two, or 100, when it comes to math?
Speak for yourself. I'm a math whiz, remember? Just kidding. But you're right. It's about creating that growth mindset, that belief that intelligence and ability aren't fixed. They're things that can be developed over time with effort and perseverance.
Absolutely. And that's something that we as teachers have the power to instill in our students.
Yeah.
We can help them see that it's okay to struggle, it's okay to ask for help. What matters most is that we never give up, that we keep learning and growing.
You know, it's funny how this whole conversation about creating a supportive classroom environment kind of reminds me of something we were discussing earlier about the importance of those intercultural teaching strategies. Because it's not just about understanding different cultural backgrounds, right? It's about recognizing that every student comes to the classroom with their own unique experiences, their own perspectives, their own ways of seeing the world.
Absolutely. And as teachers, it's our responsibility to create a space where all of those perspectives are valued and respected. A space where every student feels seen, heard, and supported.
And that's especially important in a subject like math, which, let's be honest, has a bit of a reputation for being, well, a little bit intimidating, even for those who excel at it.
You're right. Math can sometimes feel like this big, scary monster, especially when you're struggling to grasp those concepts. So as teachers, it's our job to demystify it a bit, to make it feel approachable and accessible to all learners.
And that actually reminds me of something else we talked about earlier about the need for math teachers to be tech savvy. Because let's face it, the world of technology is evolving at lightning speed, and education is no exception.
It's incredible when you think about how much has changed, even just in the last few years. I mean, I remember when having a classroom computer was a big deal. And now we're talking about interactive whiteboards, educational apps, virtual reality tools. It's amazing.
It really is. And it just goes to show how important it is for teachers to be willing to adapt and evolve right alongside those technological advancements.
Oh, absolutely. You can't just rest on your laurels thinking, okay, I learned how to use a graphing calculator. I'm good for the next 30 years. Technology is constantly changing, and as teachers, we need to be ready and willing to change right along with it.
So it's not just about being comfortable with the technology itself, but also about understanding how to integrate it into your teaching in a way that actually enhances learning, not just distracts from it.
Precisely. It's about finding that balance, right?
Yeah.
Because technology can be an incredible tool for engagement and exploration, but it can also become a crutch if we're not careful.
It's about remembering that technology is just that, a tool. And like any tool, it's only as effective as the person wielding it. Which brings us back to those core teaching skills that we were talking about earlier, the things that really form the foundation of effective teaching, regardless of the subject matter.
Exactly. Things like communication, classroom management, the ability to differentiate instruction, to meet the needs of diverse learners. Those are the skills that allow us to use technology effectively and purposefully in the classroom.
Because at the end of the day, technology or no technology, our primary goal as teachers is to create those aha moments for our students, to help them make those connections, to guide them towards a deeper understanding of the world around them.
Couldn't said it better myself. And speaking of understanding, the guide also stresses the importance of assessment in teaching.
Which, when you say it like that, sounds kind of obvious, right? Assessment, of course, we need to know how our students are doing.
Right. But like so many things in teaching, it's a lot more nuanced than it might seem at first glance. It's not just about giving tests and assigning grades, although that is part of it. It's about truly understanding where students are in their learning, identifying their strengths, pinpointing those areas where they might need a little extra support, and then using that information to guide our instruction.
So it's about more than just measuring what students have learned. It's about using that information to make decisions about what and how we teach moving forward.
Exactly. It's about gathering data, analyzing that data, and then using it to inform our teaching practice, to make adjustments as needed so we can best support all of our learners.
And when we talk about assessment, the guide mentions both formative and summative assessments. What's the difference?
Right. So formative assessments, think of those as the little check-ins you do along the way, kind of like taking the temperature of the classroom. They're those ongoing assessments that help you gauge student understanding throughout a unit or a lesson.
So it's not necessarily a formal test or quiz. It could be something as simple as a quick thumbs up, thumbs down to see if everyone's on the same page, or maybe a quick exit ticket at the end of class where students summarize the main points.
Exactly. It's about getting a pulse on where students are at so you can adjust your teaching in real time if needed. Summative assessments, on the other hand, those are the more formal assessments like tests, projects, or even those big end-of-year exams.
So those summative assessments, they come at the end of a unit, a semester, or even the school year, and they give us a more comprehensive picture of what students have learned, right?
Precisely. But here's the thing. Both types of assessments are valuable sources of information for us as teachers. The formative assessments help us adjust our sails along the way, while the summative assessments give us that broader view of where our students ended up and can even help us make changes to our teaching for the next time around.
It's all about constantly reflecting on our practice,
Right.
always looking for ways to improve and grow as educators. And I think that really speaks to the heart of what it means to be a teacher, to be a lifelong learner ourselves.
Couldn't agree more. Teaching is a journey, not a destination. And it's a journey that requires passion, dedication, a willingness to embrace new ideas, and a genuine love of learning.
And a little bit of a sense of humor doesn't hurt either, right? Especially when you're dealing with a room full of teenagers.
You got that right. A sense of humor is definitely a must-have. But seriously, for those who are up to the challenge, who are passionate about math, who enjoy the incredible rewards of working with young people, teaching can be an incredibly fulfilling and rewarding career path.
It's about more than just imparting knowledge. It's about igniting curiosity, fostering a love of learning, and empowering the next generation to use their minds to make a difference in the world. And what could be more amazing than that?
I'll tell you what, I can't think of anything.
And on that note, we'll wrap up this deep dive into the world of secondary school math teachers. We've covered a lot of ground today, from the essential skills and challenges to the incredible career paths that await those who choose this profession. If you're interested in learning more about this or other fascinating career paths, be sure to check out those RoleCatcher guides. They're packed with information.
They are. It's been a pleasure diving deep with you today.
Likewise. Until next time.